Hello, and welcome to the Greek version of today's reading in Acts chapter 8, verses 1b through 8, I think. Might be 7. We'll find out on the next slide, won't we? Okay, so let's begin. Again, where are we? Stephen's just been stoned to death, and Saul was consenting to his death. There's more commentary on the podcast, less commentary on this and more Greek. Together they combine to fill out the story. So, and it came to pass, or something came to be. This is the aorist of Ginomai. Gen is a sign of the aorist of Ginomai. Here's the nominative. So it's a mega persecution came to pass, and a mega persecution came to pass in that day, against the church that was in Jerusalem. So, tein ekklesion, tein en Hierusalomos. This is a prepositional phrase. This second article basically tacks this prepositional phrase onto church. What church are we talking about here? Why, it's the in Jerusalem church. By the way, Jerusalem's plural. City names often were plural, which is a difference between our paradigm and their paradigm. They thought of cities as being collections of entities rather than as one big one. It's a little bit of a worldview issue there. So Jerusalem, the church was scattered in Jerusalem. Now, it says here all, Pontes, all were scattered, all scattered. This is aorist, sigma alpha, aorist, there's the augment. All scattered according to the countries of the Judea and Samaria, the Judea and Samaria. So one article, so these are being conceived, Judea, Samaria, as a block here, except the apostles. So this is interesting. All here apparently doesn't mean all, which is okay. It's colloquialism. Like if I were to say, everybody thought it was hilarious. Well, what about Steve? Well, you know, Steve never thinks anything's hilarious. So it's a manner of speaking. All doesn't mean every last one. It means the majority, I think, but not the apostles. This suggests to me, as I say in the other video, that this was primarily a persecution of Greek-speaking Jewish Christians. Okay, and so who buries Stephen? Could be non-believers, but not everybody was scattered. And in fact, the fact that the apostles were, the apostles would have been first on the list if they were the primary target of this persecution. In fact, in Acts chapter 12, when Peter is the primary target, he gets out of Dodge immediately. He says, "Tell the other apostles I'm gone," and then he leaves town. So this, again, as I say in the podcast, it seems to me that the Greek-speaking Jewish Christians were just a little bit more edgy, a little bit more in your face, a little bit more radical, probably, than the Aramaic-speaking Christians were. Anything else to parse? Okay. Verse 2, and they buried, another sigma alpha, so it's aorist, there's the augment. Augment comes after the preposition in a compound verb. And they buried Stephen. Who did? Why, devout men. So this is the nominative, again, coming significantly after the verb. And they made a mega mourning, kapaton, mourning, about him. So they bury him properly. He's not, left out for dead, which I speculate in the video may indicate that this was more of a mob than an official vote. Verse 3. Now Saul was harassing. I think that this is an imperfect. I think all the letters of the all the letters of the present stem are there, but with an augment. So that's the imperfect. Saul was harassing. It wasn't just a one-day thing. He was harassing. He was harassing tein ekklesion. He was harassing the church. And now we have to go pick up this eis poruomenos. This is a participle. Men are passive or middle participles. Poruomai is deponent, so it's deponent. So going into, according to the houses. Going house by house, in other words. Both dragging, so that is the present participle, I believe. On is usually a present participle unless it's second aorist. It's not, it's present. Okay. Both dragging men and women, he was handing them over into fulakain, into jail. This is the imperfect again of paradidomi. You can see with if the reduplication and the iota are there, then it's present stem with an augment. That epsilon is the augment here, indicates that it's imperfect. Okay, Saul's on the wrong team, but he's going to find out in the next chapter. Verse 4. Therefore, I actually wonder if this is where the chapter division should have been put. In my outline of Acts, this is where the division happens. Therefore, on the one hand, the ones having been scattered, so this is aorist passive participle. Normally there would be a theta there, but the row didn't want a theta and it didn't come. My aunt is a participle. Theta epsilon would have indicated aorist passive. So diaspero, I think, scattering seed. Therefore, on the one hand, the having been scattered ones, okay, here's the verb. I was looking for a verb. It's right there. They went throughout. Ilthon is the aorist of Urkamai. They went throughout preaching the good news, the word of the word. If you have to put in words and to make it sense in English, you can do that. This is euangelizo, evangelism, preaching the good news of the word. Okay, this is a participle, men are passive participle, but it's euangelizomai, it's deponent. So even though it's passive in form, we're going to translate it actively. Verse 5. Now Philip, having gone down into the city of the Samaria, he was preaching to them the Christ. The article here, now this is, so sometimes we say Jesus Christ, and we almost feel like Christ is his last name, but it's not, of course. And there are a number of places, and this is one of them, where it's quite clear that the Christ means the Messiah, the anointed one, Hamashiach. And so this is referring to Jesus as the Christ, not his last name by any means. It's never his last name, really, but sometimes it becomes so familiar with his name that we forget that Christ means Messiah. Was preaching is imperfect. It's the present stem of keruso with an augment. He was preaching. He didn't do it on one day. It took a few days to do it. This is an aorist participle. Elf is an aorist. Nominative masculine singular. Now, there is a textual issue with Tain. What is the city of Samaria? And I babble on a bit in the podcast. What is the city? From a manuscript perspective, and since I did the podcast, I actually got out. I have more than one Greek New Testament, and the red New Testament doesn't even talk about it, but the blue Nestle New Testament, Greek New Testament, actually gives me the manuscript information on this Tain. The fact of the matter is that the best manuscripts have this article, but the majority of manuscripts apparently don't have this article, if I'm reading this correctly. And so the manuscript evidence is better for that article not being there. However, the manuscript evidence is better for the article being there. However, it reads better if it's not there. What is the city of Samaria? Why does Luke not know what the city of Samaria is? Well, see my podcast for some discussion of that. The manuscript evidence is better for the article not being there. However, it makes better sense if the article isn't there and it says into a city of Samaria. And we just don't know which one it is, but I'll leave it at that. Verse 6. Now the crowds were holding fast. This is the imperfect of echo there at the end. We're holding fast to the things being said. Men are passive participles, dative masculine plural. The things being said by the Philip, the Philip, not a Philip, but the Philip. This is agency. Homothumedon, together. Now here's an infinitive game. The accusative becomes the subject and the infinitive becomes a verb. And ento expresses while. So let me go back and get the whole sense here. The crowds were holding fast to the things being said by Philip together as they were hearing and seeing. It's literally in the them to hear and to see. But we're going to have to kind of put it in our Greek computer and come out with while they were hearing and seeing the signs that he was doing. Relative clause, relative pronoun. This is the imperfect of poieo. Verse 7. For many of the ones having spirits unclean, crying with a great voice. So this is the unclean spirits who are crying, because see, it all matches here. They came out crying with a great voice. This is the imperfect of ex erchomai. And many, having been paralyzed, this is a perfect passive participle. Men are passive participles, and there's the reduplication that tells me it's perfect. Many, having been paralyzed and lame, they were healed. So this is the aorist passive of therapeuo. The theta eta tells me it's aorist passive. Sigma alpha nu is third person plural ending, and there's the augment. They were healed. Verse 8. And it came to pass, what came to pass? A great joy. And a great joy came upon that city, on the city that. Okay, there's again a ta again. Can you parse it? Rewind to the beginning if you can. Well, now the gospel has crossed a barrier. Now we've gone from Judea into Samaria. First, we went from Aramaic-speaking Jews to Greek-speaking Jews. Now we're going to Samaritans, which are just one step further removed from the more pristine people of God. See the podcast for more on Samaria. This has been the first day of the week in Acts chapter 8.